Shalom again.
Shalom.
And Shabbat Shalom to all those who are watching with us today. It's been a while, I think, since we did a almost live service like this. So it's always good. We get a lot of people asking us. I know that the Roman calendar doesn't mean much. It's a man-made calendar. It's been changed. We go by the biblical calendar, of course. But since we live in a world that it's universally used, I don't think there's anything wrong with year to year using it as markers. You know, if you want to use it as a marker for whatever, I'd like to in this calendar year do this, or I'd like to in that calendar year do that. And the message I'm going to give today is called Why We Should Watch from 2014 to 2018. And what I want to go over today is a fair amount of things, not only in Scripture. I'm going to start here for the first maybe 45 minutes or so in Scripture and then get into a couple of other outside of Scripture prophecies that also could be pointing toward this being a really important time period. And I think you'd have to really be an ostrich and have your head in the sand not to see progressively over the last 10 years how things have really been changing. And you know, we live in a world, especially in the West, where to keep the whole system of Babylon going, you have to give this perception of safety and that everything's okay. And that's why no matter how bad anything would ever get, you'd never have the president or you'd never have the head of the Federal Reserve ever coming out and telling you it. Because if they did, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Because even if it was 99% or 99.9% chance that the whole system was going to collapse, if they came out and said it, you're forcing it. Everyone's going to panic. So no matter how bad it is, they'll always come out and say, no, it's not that bad, and we're going to fix it, and this and that. Because you need to keep the people. And the minute the people don't believe in the false security of the system anymore, then the self-fulfilling prophecy will come to pass. But what I want to show is, like I said, from Scripture and from some other things, that I really think as we've been crescendoing up, that there's a great possibility that in the next 4 years or so, there's a lot of biblical things that will be happening. So in Amos 3:7, it says, For Adonai Yahweh will do nothing unless he reveals his secret counsel to his servants, the prophets. For Adonai Yahweh will do nothing unless he reveals his secret counsel to his servants, the prophets. Now there's plenty of people out there today claiming to be prophets, which I think is also part of fulfilled prophecy, because they're not really prophets. Because Yeshua said there'll be many false prophets before the end. So I'm not coming today as a prophet. I don't have anything to prophesy to you as far as I'm going to prophesy to you future events that I'm saying is coming from Yahweh. But another way of giving prophecy, because prophecy is also inspired teaching, and that's what I'm going to give to you today. I'm going to give you inspired teaching. And what I believe more when he says he'll do nothing unless he reveals his counsel to his servants, the prophets, is that most of what we're going to see in the end time, it's not coming from somebody getting up and saying, oh, Elohim said this. It means that we're going to interpret what the prophets have told us. Because we know that 1/3 of the Bible is prophecy, and 90% of those prophecies are for the end time. So that's what we're going to do today, mostly. I am going to go into some rabbis who have given some prophecies that are showing to be correct to this point. So we should at least watch maybe a couple of those prophecies. And we're not saying, I don't know if they're correct or not, but if something is looking like it's being fulfilled, you know, if it walks like a duck and looks like a duck, you know, then it's a duck. So at the same rate, I think since Yeshua told us to watch, that we should be watching. So again, everything is in the prophets. And interesting, there's a scripture in the New Testament that says that no prophetic utterance is fulfilled in only its own book. That every prophet only had a piece of the puzzle. And then that's why Isaiah says, line upon line, precept upon precept. You have to go from place to place to put all the prophecies together. There are some big prophecies, like Isaiah 53, right? A whole chapter on the Messiah. But that's not the only prophecy of the Messiah. You still, no matter what the prophecy is, you have to go from one book to another. I can't think of off the top of my head one prophecy that you will only find in one book. Especially when we're talking about the end time. So you have to go to the different books to find it. Joel 2 in verse 30. Joel 2 and verse 30, because I want to show some of these end time prophecies of why I believe 2014 to 2018 very well could be the biggest prophetic utterances, of our time up to now. Joel 2 and verse 30 says, "And I will give signs in the heavens and in the earth, blood and fire and columns of smoke." Interesting, right? Blood, fire, columns of smoke. What could that be talking about? We saw a video here yesterday with several different places, and this is coming more and more through algae and different things, that rivers are turning to blood. It's something like you'd see out of the Ten Commandments, right? And then he also says blood and fire and columns of smoke. The first thing I think of when I think of fire and columns of smoke would be volcanoes. Could be meaning more than that, but probably at least referring in part to volcanoes. And we're seeing eruptions of volcanoes everywhere. Everywhere you look, you're starting to see. A matter of fact, there was a few weeks back or a month back where in 1 hour, 6 volcanoes erupted on the earth in different places. To me that seems pretty rare. Verse 31, "The sun will be turned to darkness and the moon to blood before the coming and great and awesome day of Yahweh." So it seems pretty evident, the sun being turned to darkness and the moon to blood. We're talking about eclipses that are happening. Maybe not only, there's other ways that this could happen, but certainly eclipses are something that throughout antiquity, whether we're looking at Josephus, whether we're looking at Philo, whether we're looking at even Brit Hadashah, New Testament historians, eclipses have always been a marker for many things. Even for kings taking thrones and prophetic things happening. So we're not going out on a limb to say that this is talking about different eclipses that will be happening. And one thing we do know, there's a lot you see in the prophetic news that coming now in 2014, we're going to have the blood moons. And it's going to be at Pesach and Sukkot, and then next year it's going to be in Pesach and Sukkot. It's true, but because most people don't keep the biblical calendar, whoever may be hearing this, who don't know what the biblical calendar is, we have the book on the biblical calendar. You can please download it on our website. Also, we have lesson 11 on the biblical calendar. And according to the biblical calendar, the first blood moon already happened last Sukkot. So everybody is already half a year behind us understanding the blood moons. So, things are already moving. And as we're going to see some things that have even been happening recently in the news here in Israel and other things, I think we've already started it. I think that some things, that very, very big things that are happening in the last couple of months, that blood moon from last Sukkot was something that was not just a coincidence, but now you're talking about 5 blood moons, 5 the number of grace, not 4. And next year, the first day of the year, which is the day of the equinox, is also going to be a total eclipse of the sun. It's an extremely rare thing to happen. That the equinox in the first day of the year would happen on the same day, and it would also be a total eclipse of the sun. So we are seeing signs like it's talking about. "For it shall be, all who shall call on the name of Yahweh will be saved. For salvation will be in Mount Zion and in Jerusalem, as Yahweh has said, and among the survivors whom Yahweh will call." We just talked before. It's not going to be a big revival in the end time. That's nonsense. You don't see it in anywhere. What you see in the scriptures is there's a great falling away. And it's only a remnant. If Yahweh hadn't left us a remnant, we'd be like Sodom and Gomorrah. If the children of Israel be as the sands of the sea, only a remnant will be left. So it's another important thing to look at. 2 million plus people left Egypt, but only 20 years and above, entered the promised land. So it's a time really for us to prepare for that baptism of fire and be getting our lives ready. So again, all the way until Yeshua returns, no matter when that will be, there's going to be mockers and scoffers in the end time saying, "Where is the promise of his coming?" They've been saying this since the fathers fell asleep. But for the true people of Yahweh, as we get closer and you see all of the things coming about, Yeshua says, "Look up, your salvation is near." I want to go to Luke 21. Luke 21, which confirms some of the things we're reading here. "And there will be severe earthquakes from place to place." Severe earthquakes. Now, I was saying last week in California, I forget exactly, so don't quote me verbatim, but it was something like within 45 minutes there was 30 earthquakes in California, which is a lot of earthquakes any way you look at it. But the biggest one was 4.5. So earthquakes, lower earthquakes happen all the time. There's thousands of them in here. Matter of fact, somebody said because when Ariel Sharon was being buried last week, there was a 3.5 earthquake here in Galilee, that was judgment. It's like judgment, we couldn't even feel it. You know, you hear it on the news that you know what happened. So a 3.5 earthquake is far from judgment. I mean, like I said, there's thousands of them. But over here in the scripture, it says severe earthquakes. So again, I don't know as far as lower earthquakes, if there's an increase of these lower ones, maybe, maybe not. But through antiquity, there's always been hundreds, if not thousands, of small ones, twos, threes. But I'm talking about 6 and above. There has definitely been an increase of major earthquakes. When you're talking about 6s and 7s and even 8s that are very rare, you know, that you're not going to see all the time, that we're seeing an increase of. So it says severe earthquakes from place to place, and they're not all in one region. You know, they're happening everywhere from South America over to Asia, you know, to Africa, to Europe, all over the place. Turkey, you name it, they're happening here. Severe earthquakes from place to place, and famine and plagues, without a doubt. We see that worldwide famine and different things happening. And there will be fears and terrorist acts. I don't think there's ever been a time in history that you're seeing more of this happening. And here we are in Israel, we're in the eye of the storm, and all around us, the Middle East is falling apart. You know, that Al-Qaeda has overtaken parts of Iraq again. And they're coming. There's a line now they made from Syria to Iraq. A straight line. And nobody's going to do nothing. You know, there's no way America's getting back involved, so they've got clear rein there. The same with Afghanistan. They're looking to run out of there with their head between their legs, and they're not going to build up there. And they know it. So now you have Egypt that's in total chaos. You know, you have Lebanon that's falling apart. You have Syrian chaos. You have Iraq, the situation with Iran. So all around here, I mean, you're really building up to a nasty situation that's not too far in the future. And I don't know how it's going to end, but certainly it's a fearful thing to think about as all these things are happening. And great signs will be seen from heaven. Things that can't even be explained. Meteors coming out of the sky, things going across, sounds and noises, all these oddities that people can't explain. And the winters will be severe. What more do I need to say? 135 below zero. I mean, who would think? You know, so the commentator said it would even be hard to breathe. I would think it would be hard to live. How on earth can you even be in that atmosphere? 135 below zero. They said a week or two in Chicago, and I saw the pictures on the news, there was like 12 inches of ice, and they said it was colder in Chicago at that point than it normally is on the coldest place on earth. I mean, there were things in the States that were 50 and 60 below zero. I mean, just unheard of things like that were happening. So winter's being severe, I mean, who of us? And this is, again, worldwide. It's not like one area we're looking at. We're looking at worldwide, just everywhere you look, severity like people have never known before. Verse 25, the same chapter. And there will be signs in the sun and the moon and the stars, and on the earth will be anxiety of nations, will be bewilderment, roaring of sea and surf. And like I said before, the blood moons that are coming on the holy days, that is a very rare event. And also anybody who may be listening to this that never saw the message I gave 2012 at Sukkot on the signs of the heavens and the coming of the bridegroom. I'd watch that because it's not just the eclipses, but also you're talking about the Mazaroth, you know, which is the 12 constellations that are for the 12 sons of Israel, and how that Mazaroth every 2,000 years, because of the spinning of the earth on its axis, how it turns. And it's interesting to look at every 2,000 years how the sun starts the year in a different constellation and the meaning of it, which is really prophetic because nobody can do that. Only Yahweh can set it that way. So he sets these prophetic things up for what? So that we know. You know, in 1 Thessalonians 5, remember when it's talking about a thief in the night and it's coming, but he says, but you are not in darkness, that you will be caught unaware. And anybody that's a true believer in Yeshua that is not seeing how close we're coming to the end, shame on them. Shame on them that are just thinking, oh, there could be 100 years left or 200 years left. It's impossible. It's impossible according to Scripture and what we're seeing on the ground that it couldn't happen that way. Matthew 24 and verse 32. Matthew 24, verse 32. But learn the parable of the fig tree. When its branch becomes tender and it puts out leaves, you know that summer is near. So also you, when you see all these things, know that it is near at the doors. I've talked about this many times. Even Ronit was talking about it when she was here giving the lecture on the calendar. That the fig tree is different than other trees. Because usually, when you're planting, we're all planting our gardens, and right, you see your leaves coming out, and you're waiting for that little bit of fruit, and you see the cycle that comes. But with figs, it's not the same way. All of a sudden, the fruit and the leaves pop out at the same time. And why is Yeshua using that as an analogy to us? Because verse 24, truly I say to you, in no way will this generation pass until all these things have occurred. So he's clearly telling us there are prophecies that are for many years. The Daniel 9 prophecy, it's a 490-year prophecy. It's going to be over a long period of time. But this prophecy is not. He's telling us that when it starts, whatever the starting point is, and he gives us the starting point, he says, watch the fig tree, that it'll all happen in one generation. Another reason why 2014 to 2018 are extremely important is I'll show you some of the things from the dates that you could fill in the blanks there. So he says, this generation will not pass till all these things happen. If we go to Joel 3, there's many scriptures we can go to showing Israel being the fig tree, Jeremiah 24, but I'll just read Joel 3 for now. Joel 3 and verse 1. For behold, in those days, not Joel 3, I'm sorry, it is Joel 1, verse 1. Joel 1, verse 1. I'll read Joel 3 later. The word of Yahweh was to Yoel, the son of Pethuel, hear this, you old men, and give ear, all you people of the land. Has this been in your days, or even the days of your fathers? Tell your sons about it, and their sons to another generation. What was left by the cutter, the swarming locust ate. And that left of the swarming locust, the locust larva ate. And that left of the locust larva, the stripping locust ate. So he's showing it's progressively getting worse, until you get to the point that you realize it can't get any worse. Where it's getting worse toward the time, but now these things have to happen. Awake, drunkards, and weep, and wail, O wine drinkers, over the great must, for it is cut off from your mouth. For a nation has come up on my land, strong and without number. Its teeth are the teeth of a lion, and the jaw teeth of a lioness. There my vine is desolation, and it has splintered my fig tree. It has splintered my fig tree. He has stripped it and thrown it down, its branches grow white. So Yahweh clearly is using the analogy of Israel being the fig tree. Joel is all about the end. It's only 3 little chapters, all about the end time, and showing the invasion that's coming in Israel getting attacked at that time. Psalm 102. Psalm 102. Read that many times. I won't read the whole chapter. But just showing what we're talking about. The making of the nation of Israel as being the beginning of the end times. Psalm 102. I won't read the beginning, which is clearly referring to the Holocaust, at least in analogy form when you look at it, talking about having their bones burned, their ashes going, being stricken, not eating, bones staying to the skin staying to the bones, their days are finished in smoke, my bones are burned like a hearth, verse 3. Clearly you can relate that to the Holocaust. And then I'm going to start here, though, in verse 12. He says, but you, O Yahweh, shall dwell forever, and your memory to generation and generation. You shall arise, have mercy on Zion, for the time to pity her, yea, the appointed time is come. So now Israel's going through this horrific time that they've never went through before. Literally, the people are being burned to death, starved to death, and they're thinking they're going to cease to exist. But he's saying no. At the appointed time, you will be a nation again. And we know from the prophecy that Israel was told, if they don't obey Yahweh, Deuteronomy 28, Leviticus 26, they will be punished 7 times duration for their sins. Why 7 times duration? Because of the Sabbath and the land Sabbaths. and they were not keeping the land Sabbaths, which are every 7th year, so they were going to be punished 7 times. So if you take a prophetic year of being 360 days and times it by 7, you come out with 2,520 years. And amazingly enough, like Andy said, after the temple was destroyed, there was a remnant living here in the land until 573 BC. That's the year that Ezekiel is writing his book, and that's the year they're all out of Israel. If you add that 2,520 years, you come exactly to 1948. Exactly. So he says it here. Why should we be surprised? Yahweh told us, "You shall arise, have mercy on Zion, for the time to pity her, the appointed time." And that word, appointed time, is moed, which also means set apart time or holy time. So there can be a holy day that's connected with this, as we talked about before, from the book of Daniel, possibly Shavuot. "For your servants take pleasure in its stones and pity its dust." What would that mean before 130 years ago? Probably nothing. But now, through archaeology, we know what it means. You know, I mean, the people from ancient days would think we're crazy, digging up their stones and looking at their dust and thinking it's important, and it is important. But they didn't look at it that way. And that's why they built city on top of city, because they didn't see archaeology as something that was important. But we do. "So nations shall fear the name of Yahweh, and all the kings of the earth your glory. When Yahweh will build up Zion, he shall appear in his glory." Very simple. Zion is more built now than it ever has been. There's 1 million people living there. It's bigger than it's ever been. And he tells us, when will the Messiah appear? When he builds up Zion. So we know. And when will it be? Maybe hundreds of years after that? No. Everything will happen in one generation. So we don't have to add anything to the picture. All we have to do is take the scriptures that are telling us and believe them. Verse 18. "Who is it written for? This shall be written for the last generation, and the people to be created shall praise Yahweh." So it's written for the last generation. There's not another generation, which fits exactly what Yeshua said. This generation will not pass until all these things happen. So very, very clearly, we have a starting date. We have a starting date here. Because 1948, actually, if you want to go to November 29th, 1947, that's when the United Nations vote took place to partition the land of Israel and make Israel a state again. I'll talk a little bit later about even 1917, the Balfour Declaration, which was really the beginning of it, that it was declared, given by Lord Balfour from England, who was they're leading the world at that time. And England in 1917 was controlling, after World War I, the land of Israel. They were the controllers of it, or at that time, you could say the custodians, at least for a short period of time, that they made that vision. But then statehood came May 14th, 1948. Statehood came May 14th, 1948. So we have the markers. It's not ambiguous of when Israel started, when these prophecies started. Israel became a nation, like I said, whether you want to go by the UN vote or the literal declaration of statehood, I think is a better marker, which is May 14th, 1948. Now if we go to Zechariah, another really, really awesome book of the end time, filling in a lot of the details. Because Zechariah starts in the beginning with some dual prophecies from ancient Israel till today, but then most of the book of Zechariah is end time. I mean, without a shadow of a doubt, you get to chapter 14, the Messiah is returning from heaven, his feet are standing on the Mount of Olives, so nobody's going to say it's historical. Literally, most of it is for the end time. But I want to start in chapter 1, because there's something in here that also gives us a prophetic marker. Zechariah 1, "In the 8th month, in the 2nd year of Darius," we know who Darius was, Darius the king, the Persian king. Remember, after the Jews went into captivity down in Babylon, they were there for 70 years, and then Cyrus was the one that let them come back. Cyrus and Darius are leading at the same time. Maybe one was the king of Persia and one was the king of the Medes, possibly, but they are two different people. They're not the same person. But during the 2nd year of Darius, the word of Yahweh came to Zechariah, the son of Berechiah, the son of Iddo, the prophet, saying, "Yahweh has been angry with your fathers, very angry. Therefore you shall say to them, so says Yahweh of hosts, turn back to me, says Yahweh of hosts, and I will turn back to you, says Yahweh of hosts. Do not be as your fathers, to whom the former prophets have proclaimed to them, saying, so says Yahweh of hosts, turn back now from your evil ways and your evil doings. But they did not hear or pay attention to me, says Yahweh. Your fathers, where are they? And the prophets, do they live forever? So again, this was after they're cast out and right as they're coming back. But my words and my statutes, which I commanded my servants the prophets, did they not overtake your fathers? And they turned back and said, as Yahweh of hosts purposes to do to us, according to our ways and according to our doings, so he has done to us. So they're paying their penalty of their sins, what they did. And then you drop down to verse 12, and look what he says. And the messenger of Yahweh answered and said, O Yahweh of hosts, until when will you not have pity on Jerusalem and on the cities of Judah, against which you have cursed these 70 years? So, okay, is Yahweh going to save his people from this Holocaust? Is he going to save the demonic Hitler from killing every Jew? Yes, he said he would. Is he going to make a nation of Israel again? Yeah, we read it already. Is that the last generation? Is it the generation the Messiah returns? Yes. But is it going to be all great for Israel and for Jerusalem during that time? No. No, he's saying during the 70 years, the period we're in right now, they're being cursed. You know, and really when you think about it, do they deserve the blessing? You know, are they fulfilling the will of the Torah according to Deuteronomy 28 and Leviticus 26 to receive that blessing? And the answer is no. The answer is absolutely no. As a nation, they are not doing the things to get it. So he's saying, you know, that when, how long will it be that you'll let these things happen? And he says, don't worry. You know, it's 70 years, after 70 years, there's going to be a big change. Then you're going to see these things are going to happen. If we go to Zechariah 8, we'll see something else is happening during these 70 years. Zechariah 8, in verse 9. So says Yahweh of hosts, let your hands be made strong, you who hear in these days these words by the mouth of the prophets. Remember, Yahweh does nothing unless he tells his servants, the prophets, that in the day the house of Yahweh is founded, the sanctuary is to be rebuilt. So clearly it's got to be end time. This hasn't happened yet. For before those days, right, and who builds the sanctuary of Yahweh? The Messiah. We know from this very book, Zechariah 6 and verse 12. The man whose name is the branch, he will build the temple, and he will bear the glory. Zechariah 6:12. So he says, by the mouth of the prophets, in the day the house of Yahweh is founded, the sanctuary is to be rebuilt. But look at this before that time. For before those days, there was no payment for man, nor was there payment for animal. And there was no peace to him from the adversary who went out or came in. For I sent every man a man against his neighbor. But now I will not be to the remnant of this people as to the former days, says Yahweh of hosts. For there shall be peace for the seed, and vine shall give its fruit, and the ground shall give its produce, and the heavens shall give their dew. And I will cause the remnant of this people to inherit these things. And it shall be as you were a curse among the nations, O house of Judah. I mean, why? This tiny little nation with 7 million people that gives to the world everything from organic growing to the top scientists. You know, more Nobel Peace Prize for science and all kinds of things given the Jews than anybody else. Why does the world hate this nation so much? Nobody can figure it out. And he says, as it was, as you were a curse among the nations, O house of Judah and house of Israel, so I will save you, and you shall be a blessing. Do not fear, let your hands be made strong. So again, Israel, we're living it, we're seeing it. I've done 50 or 100 sermons on this, on the importance of Israel being a nation in the end time. But if anyone is honest with themselves, including the Jewish people, you know, they could say these 70 years have not been such a blessing in every way you can think about it. You know, there's a joke I heard a while ago where, you know, this person dies, and all of a sudden, you know, he's up there before the throne of Elohim with the judgment, and he's saying to him, you know, Elohim, you're not a respecter of person. You know, you're supposed to treat everybody equal. And yet your Bible says the Jewish people are the chosen people, and the Jewish people are your chosen people. You know, well, why do they get all these blessings if we're all equal? And he says, yeah, don't worry, wait till you see the neighbors I give them. So everything equals out in the end time, you know? I mean, it's almost like a bad joke that you bring these people back to their land after 2,520 years under these circumstances. But if it wasn't under these circumstances, the end could never happen. It just couldn't happen. So Yahweh had to make it this way. He had to bring them into a nation that was already filled with Arabs. The Bible talks about these Arabs. It talks about the prophecies of those very Arabs coming against them. And just like he says here, every man will be against his neighbor. And they are neighbors. Arabs and Jews are brothers. They come from the same loins. You know, Malachi says that. Don't we all have one father? So why? Why is it happening? It's happening because it's prophesied. It has to happen that way. But the important part to realize is he gives us a prophetic marker. He says it'll be exactly for 70 years. So if we look over here, from 1948, the marker of Israel becoming a nation, plus 70 years, you come to 2018. As far as the 70 years being fulfilled, you know, that this curse will be taken off at that time. Next, I want to go to Ezekiel 17, because there's another prophecy of another nation in the end times that also has a 70-year prophecy that's connected with Israel's 70-year prophecy, and that's Babylon. Ezekiel 17, and the word of Yahweh was to me, saying, Son of man, put forth a riddle, and speak a parable to the house of Israel. And say, so says Adonai Yahweh, a great eagle came to Lebanon, one with great wings, long of pinion, full of feathers, having different colors to him. And he took the top of the cedar off. So who is this great eagle? I'm not going to read all the chapter. Drop down to verse 12. Say now to the rebellious house, do you know what these mean? But speak, behold, the king of Babylon has come to Jerusalem and has taken its king and his rulers and has brought them to himself at Babylon. You know, what is the symbol of the United States of America today? The great eagle. They're even called that by many people around the world. Babylon the same. And he took the royal seed and he has cut with him a covenant and has made him enter into an oath, and he took the mighty of the land. And the kingdom, that the kingdom might be low, that it might not lift itself up or keep its covenant, and that it might not stand. But he rebelled against him in sending his messengers to Egypt to give horses and many people to him. Shall he prosper? Shall he who does these things escape? Or shall he break the covenant he delivered? Now, I don't think you can put this to just one experience. This has happened many times. You can go many times, going back to the Madrid conference, going back to Oslo, going back to the Y agreement in 1998. All these different times. Even recently with Netanyahu, with Olmert. Most Israeli leaders in the last 20 years or so have been forced to go to America, and they've been hoodwinked and persuaded to go into an agreement that's not good. And what does he say? But he rebelled against him, sending his messengers to Egypt to give horses and people. Shall he prosper? At the same time that America is trying to force Israel into giving up their land and making borders that are non-defensible, they're giving all this aid to Egypt to build Egypt against them. So here it is, and what does Yahweh say? Shall he who does these things escape, or shall he break the covenant and be delivered? And that's the big question. That's what they're wondering now with Prime Minister Netanyahu. Is he going to go along with this with America? Or is he going to break the covenant and be saved? And the difference is something big, as we're going to see, because the minute that they do make the Palestinian state, things are going to move very, very quickly, because Yahweh says it. He clearly says it. Once they officially divide his land, and everything centers around Jerusalem, and even the whole peace plan centers, all these other things, they can come up with agreements, but Jerusalem is the center of all of it. Then Zechariah 1, back to Zechariah, in verse 18. Who are the ones who are pushing this peace agreement? Zechariah 1 and verse 18. Then I lifted up my eyes and looked, and I saw 4 horns. And I said to the messenger who was talking with me, what are these? And he answered and said, these are the horns that have scattered Judah, Israel, and Jerusalem. And Yahweh made me see 4 craft masons. Really interesting. Why is he seeing 4 craft masons? Who are the people in the end time? The ones that are working toward dividing Jerusalem. The ones that are trying to bring about this one world government. They're Freemasons. Freemasons are people that come from craft masons. That's what they are. That's why they have the compass and the square, and their aprons, because that's where it originates from. From literally masonry. And I said, what are these coming to do? And he spoke, saying, these are the horns which have scattered Judah, so no man lifts up his head, but these have come to terrify them, to throw down the horns of the nations who lifted up their horn over the land of Judah, to scatter it. And it's interesting, there's 4 of them. There's something called the Quartet: Russia, America, United States, EU, and United Nations. The 4, that's why they're called the Quartet, and their sole purpose is bringing about a Palestinian state. That's what they're doing, exactly like the book of Zechariah tells us. Joel 3 in verse 1, talked about that a little bit ago. Now we'll read it. Because when this does happen, unfortunately the Bible says it will happen, but when it does, it says, for behold, in those days and at that time, clearly end time, it's a Jewish phrase or Jewish idiom showing it's the last days, when I bring again the exiles of Judah and Jerusalem, he's already done it, they're already here, I will also gather all nations, and I will bring them down to the valley of Jehoshaphat. That's the Kidron Valley. And I will enter into judgment with them there for my people Israel and my inheritance, for my people and my inheritance Israel, whom they have scattered among the nations, and they divided my land. So very clearly, when this comes about, it's going to bring it. Now, I find it also pretty interesting that America, under the Secretary of State John Kerry, at all courses is trying to push this deal. And it's so illogical. If you talk to anybody here in Israel, everybody says, this makes no sense. There's nothing on the ground that would even remotely make you think we're close to a deal. So why would Kerry keep, every time he comes out, saying we're very close to an agreement, and by Passover it's all going to be done? Why would he be saying this when it's absolutely not true? And at the same rate, you have the Palestinian uprising. You don't hear so much about it, but it's there. At least here in Israel, you could go in the news and you could see it every day, that there's much more violence that is coming in the West Bank, coming in Gaza. They're very close to a 3rd Intifada that's starting. And then, like I said, you already have the problems with Egypt, you have the problems with Syria, you have the problems with Lebanon. And now all of them are through Al-Qaeda. Now Al-Qaeda came out just a few weeks ago and said one of their main purposes is, once they get the stronghold around here, is to destroy Israel. So, again, when it comes to the Muslim mindset, they'll stop killing each other for a day as long as they can get toward Israel. So all this is being set up. And why? Why would the Secretary of State be pushing all these things? Why would they be pushing to give up the Jordan Valley, which is their main defense coming from the east? Why on earth would they be doing it? Because it's fulfilling prophecy. It's fulfilling prophecy. And that's not to even mention Iran. Why on earth America, Babylon, who was the ally of Israel for all these years, why would they throw Israel under the bus? Allow Iran to go unfettered now, making nuclear weapons. And now, not only didn't they go in and take care of the situation in Syria, but now they're saying Iran can be the leader in these peace talks. They've given Iran to be the leader of all this Middle East. As all the other nations are crumbling around, Iran is building up the strength and giving by a platter by President Obama. Why on earth did the UN in September, did President Obama, since 1979, there's no relations with Iran and America. Why would he be calling Rouhani over and over when Rouhani wouldn't even talk to him? Some of the pundits in America, if you watch the news, they were saying he's like a guy that got turned down to the prom and keeps calling back. What American president would shame himself that way? And for what reason? For what reason? What are they gaining out of this? All of these things are showing where we are in prophecy. They're showing because I believe one of the next step, even before the peace, it could come either way. My personal opinion is that the peace will come out of the war. not the other way around. And you could see it, like I said, you're not seeing a lot in the news about Russia. President Putin telling his army, preparing them for war. You don't see about China, the same thing. That China feels that America is going to do a preemptive nuclear strike against them. That they're feeling threatened that way. And they're preparing for war. You know, that crazy man in North Korea, you know, he always says it. But, you know, they're always saying this kind of thing. But we're in a really, really precarious situation here. So as all these things are coming together, and it's all part of it. It's all part of the war. Now, how does this all fit in, though? It all fits in because of Jeremiah 25, which is really interesting. And you know what? Many people say they believe in the Bible, and they believe in the prophecies, and they even say they believe America's Babylon. But I don't believe they can really believe it, because when I read the scripture to you, and if you're not going to act, then you can't believe it. Because you know what? Yahweh does give us a time frame to Babylon. It's not something open-ended. It's not something that we can say, well, maybe it'll go on for another 100 years. We don't know. Oh yes, we do know. Yahweh tells us exactly how long He'll allow Babylon to rule the nations, and then that's it. So it's not something that is an ambiguous prophecy. It's clearly an end-time prophecy, and He tells us it. So if we look over here, Jeremiah 25, and I'll start in verse 11. And this whole land shall be a waste and a horror, and these nations will serve the king of Babylon 70 years. And it shall be when 70 years are fulfilled, I will punish the king of Babylon and that nation, and the land of the Chaldeans for their iniquity, says Yahweh, and I will make it everlasting ruins. And I will bring on that land all the words which I spoke against it, all that is written in the book which Jeremiah has prophesied against all the nations. For many nations and great kings will lay service on them, even they, and I will repay them according to their deeds and according to the work of their hands. For so says Yahweh, the Elohim of Israel, take the wine cup of his wrath from my hand, and cause all the nations to whom I shall send you to drink it. And they shall drink it, reel to and fro, and be maddened because of the sword which I will send against them. And then he says, he took the cup from his hand, and he gave it to all the different people, to Egypt, to Jordan, to the Philistines, to Moab, to Tyre, to Sidon. And you look at all these nations that are here, that he's talking about over here. Most of them are the ones that America has been fighting against, or that the Arab Spring has caused chaos. So we're seeing this fulfilled before our eyes. Even Egypt, who a couple of years ago would have thought Egypt would have been so unstable. But he says all these nations are going to be unstable. And then drop down to verse 29. For behold, I begin to bring evil on the city on which is called by my name. We know the beast power is going to overtake Jerusalem for those 42 months. And shall you be found entirely without guilt? You shall not be without guilt. For I will call for a sword on all those living on the earth, says Yahweh of hosts. And now you prophesy against them these words, and say to them, Yahweh will roar from on high, and give forth his voice from his holy habitation, just like we read in Joel 2 and verse 32. He shall magnify, roar over his dwelling place. He answers with a shout like those who tread out the grapes against all those living on the earth. A roaring will go to the ends of the earth, for Yahweh has a controversy with all nations. He will enter into judgment with all flesh. He will give the wicked to the sword, says Yahweh. Verse 33, and the slain of Yahweh on that day will be from one end of the earth even to the other end of the earth. So clearly this is end time. This is not something that happened before. For people who may be hearing this for the first time, you can easily go to lesson 15 we have on Babylon to prove who Babylon is. We have many sermons on Babylon. There's close to 100 characteristics of end-time Babylon that only America fits. They're the world policeman. They're the steam engine of the world economy. You know, even China, that is upcoming, you know, in trading and all these other things. There's nobody that trades like America. GDP in America, more than $16 trillion a year. China is about 1/4 of that. So clearly, when you're looking at Babylon, the #1 military in the world, all the things, only America fits it. There's no other country that fits all the characteristics. And he's saying that there's only 70 years. There's only 70 years for Babylon. So if you look at, there's something a little different here though, because Israel's existence in the end time starts when they become a nation, right? 1948, that's not hard. But if you look at Babylon, Babylon in the end times really starts at the end of World War II. Because in 1945 is created the United Nations, as we're going to see as the end time beast, the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank. All these things start in 1945. So if you look at 70 years, 70 years for Babylon. $1945 plus 70, you come out with 2015. I find it interesting that between the 70 years for Babylon and the 70 years for Israel is exactly 3 to 3.5 years. Which is important because, as we're going to see, when Babylon falls, what happens? The beast power rises, and how long does the beast power reign? Exactly 42 months. So I don't think that's a coincidence. That there's a 3 to 3.5 year difference between the setting up of the global government in the end time the New World Order in 1945 and the establishing of the State of Israel, which means, like I said, both are given 70 years before this big change happens, which means there's a 3 to 3.5 year difference between the two of them. Revelation 13 and verse 5. Maybe I'll read in Revelation 13 all of it because it fits in there. Revelation 13, and I stood on the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast coming out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his horns 10 crowns, and on his heads names of blasphemy. And the beast which I saw was like a leopard, and its feet were like the feet of a bear, and its mouth was the lion's mouth, and the dragon gave its power. This corresponds from Daniel 7. Now the interesting part in Daniel 7, we have a eagle, a lion with eagle's wings. But the eagle's wings are plucked off. The eagle's wings are plucked off, and it's made to stand like a bear. So it's interesting. You have the lion, the eagle, the leopard, the bear, and the dragon. If you look at the Security Council, the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council, the lion, Great Britain, the eagle, America, the leopard, France, the bear, Russia, and the dragon, China. It says over here that there's 7 heads and 10 horns. There's also a president of the UN and a rotating president, and there's a secretary general. Today it's Funky Moon, isn't that his name? Funky Moon. Funky Moon. So there's 7 heads. There's 7 heads. You have the 5 permanent members, America, Britain, France, Russia, and China. You have the Secretary General and the rotating president, 7 heads, and 10 horns. You have 10 members who rotate. 10 members who rotate. So we see it here. And if you drop down now to verse 5, and a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies were given to it, and authority was given to it to act for 42 months. So this global government is going to be given authority by Yahweh to reign for 42 months over the earth. We know that it's going to move its seat to Jerusalem. I don't believe it has to be in Jerusalem for the whole 42 months. In Daniel 11, it's ambiguous. It doesn't say how long it will be there, but it will move there. But one thing is certain, that it will get its power for 42 months. We're going to go into that a little bit here. If we go into Daniel 8, Daniel, the 8th chapter, verse 15. And it happened when I, Daniel, had seen the vision, that I sought the meaning. And behold, the form of a man stood before me. And I heard a man's voice between the banks of Ulai, and he called out and said, Gabriel, make this one understand the vision. And he came beside my place. And when he came, I feared and fell on my face. But he said to me, O son of man, understand, for the vision is for the time of the end. Not hard to understand. So this vision is for our time now. And while he was speaking with me, I lay stunned and was on my face toward the ground, but he touched me and made me stand. And he said, Behold, I will make you know what will happen in the last end of the indignation, for it is for the time appointed for the end. The ram which you saw with 2 horns are the kings of Media and Persia. So like we said, the Daniel vision, just to summarize it a little bit, I don't have time to get into Daniel 2 and Daniel 4 and Daniel 7, but we know the head is of gold, Babylon, and then after Babylon is Medio-Persia, who are the Russians and the Iranians, at least from the geographical area where they are. Then you have Greece, which is indicative of EU, and then the 4th beast is totally different than all the other ones. It's a world government with Satan himself ruling, as we'll see. So he's speaking, and the ram which you saw are the horns of the kings of Media and Persia. And the shaggy goat is the king of Greece, like we said, and the great horn between his eyes is the first king, Babylon. And as for that which was shattered, and 4 stood up in its place, 4 kingdoms shall stand out of the nation, but not in its power. So after this war comes, it's not going to be a good war. Many people are going to die. We know from Revelation there's a third of mankind that will die in this coming war. And it'll be weakened. The deadly wound of the beast that's talked about in Revelation 13. So this beast is going to be weakened, and that's what's going to bring Satan to the earth. Because he's going to say, wow, I've been waiting for 70 years for these guys to get my kingdom together, and they can't do it. It's not happening because they don't want it to happen. It's not happening because they don't have the power to make it happen. So Satan will come himself, Yahweh will allow him, and he'll set up this 4th kingdom. And then it says, in the latter time of their kingdom, when the apostasy has been complete, a king strong of face and understanding dark sentences shall stand up. This will be anti-Messiah. And his power shall be mighty, but not by his own power. And he shall destroy wondrously, and he shall prosper and work and destroy the powerful and the holy people. And also through his policy he will make deceit succeed in his hand, and he will lift himself up in his heart, and by peace he will destroy many. By peace. What did we say? Daniel 9. I'm not going to go there. It's the next chapter over, but verse 26 and 27, maybe I should. Just read it quickly. And after 62 weeks, Messiah will be cut off, but not for himself. And the people of a coming ruler shall destroy the city, the Romans, and the sanctuary, and its end will be with flood, and its ruins are determined, and there shall be war until the end. And then he, who is the he? In Hebrew, it always goes back to the last person named, who is anti-Messiah. He'll confirm a covenant with many for 1 week, the 70th week. And in the middle of the week he will cause the sacrifice and the offering to cease, and on the most outer corners abominations by a desolator, even until the end. The interesting part is he's going to confirm covenant. If you look that up in Hebrew, it literally means to reestablish an already existing agreement. So we know, we already have Oslo, roadmap, all the same. Whatever Kerry's calling what he's doing now. The bottom line is, it's the same agreement, they're reestablishing it, it's dividing the land of Israel, and it's bringing the war that we're talking about here in Daniel 8. And through this horrific war, Israel is going to be forced to have to undergo this peace deal. And that's why it says, he will destroy many, not by war, but by peace. It's all about a false peace agreement that's coming here. Back to Daniel 8 in verse 25, the rest of the verse. He shall also stand up against the prince of princes, but he shall be shattered without a hand. So again, this is Yeshua fighting him in the end time, and we see that. If we go to Jeremiah 30, because there's a misconception that people keep thinking of this 7 years, and then there's 3.5 years great tribulation that comes. The Bible never talks about that. The Bible never talks about a 3.5 year great tribulation. That's something that prophecy teachers have written about, made thousands of videos. I never found it once in the Bible, and believe me, I studied a lot. It does say in that time there will be great tribulation. But there is never anywhere in the Bible, or great trouble, you can even say, there's nothing as an event called the Great Tribulation. That's a 3.5-year period. Nothing. What we have is what we just read in Revelation 13, that the beast will rule the earth for 42 months. But that's not Great Tribulation. During that time, the whole earth worships the beast. They want him. They're taking the mark. It's not forced upon people. This is the time that all the earth is looking for healing. And they're going to get it. They're going to get it through this false guide. The lying signs and wonders that come from Revelation. So this isn't Great Tribulation. This is where the people that are left after this war, they're going to think he's the Messiah. They're going to think the kingdom has started. But for the nation of Israel and the true believers, they're not going to go for it. And that's the time, this time that they're thinking is the Great Tribulation, is actually what the Bible calls the time of Jacob's trouble. It's the time of Jacob's trouble. We can read it in Jeremiah 30. And this is why they're going to be deceived. Because when we're trying to tell them, no, this guy isn't the Messiah, he's the anti-Messiah. Because of their false prophecy that they had before that, they're going to say, no, look at the Great War and all that stuff. That was the Great Tribulation. And now the Messiah's here. And actually, it's only the beginning of the reign of the beast. It's only the beginning of it. But Jeremiah 30 says, the word that came to Jeremiah from Yahweh, saying, so speaks Yahweh Elohim of Israel, saying, write for yourself all the words that I have spoken to you in a book. For lo, the days come, says Yahweh, that I will turn the captivity of my people Israel and Judah, says Yahweh. And I will cause them to return to the land that I gave their fathers, and they shall possess it. We're living in those days. And these are the words that Yahweh spoke concerning Israel and concerning Judah. For so says Yahweh, we have heard a sound of trembling, of dread, and not of peace. See, when they talk peace, 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 and when Satan comes to the earth and he forces this peace, for us it's going to be dread. That's where it says, remember, when Jerusalem is surrounded by armies, those in Judea flee to the mountains. Get out of there. Because it's not going to be a good time for believers. Maybe the world is accepting this false Messiah, but for true believers, it's not a good time. So he says it's a time of dread, not of peace. And now, and see whether a male is giving birth. Why do I see every man with his hands on his loins like a woman giving birth, and all faces are turned to paleness? Alas, for that day is great, for none is like it. It is the time of Jacob's trouble, but he will be saved out of it. For it shall be in that day, says Yahweh of hosts, I will break his yoke from your neck, and I will burst your bonds, and strangers will not enslave him again. But they shall serve Yahweh their Elohim, and David their king, whom I will raise up to them. And you, O my servant Jacob, do not fear, says Yahweh. Do not be terrified, O Israel. For lo, I will save you from afar, and your seed from the land of their captivity. And Jacob shall return and have quiet and be untroubled, and no one will make him afraid. So this is what we're up against. Once this war comes out, once this false peace comes, who does the anti-Messiah come after? He's coming after the believers. He's coming after Israel. Let's go back to Daniel 8 now. The beginning of the chapter, Daniel 8 and verse 8. So you have Babylon falls during the war. The beast power rises. He sets himself up for his 42-month reign. And then, of course, he comes after. We have the same thing in Revelation 12. Remember when Satan is cast to the earth, and what happens? There's a great flood that comes after the woman who's fleeing. And who does Satan come after? He's angry. He comes after the remnant who have the faith of Yeshua and keep the commandments of Yahweh. He's coming after anyone that Yahweh will allow him to get who's not protected, who is not taken away at that point. Daniel 8 and verse 8. Then the he-goat became very great, and when he was mighty, the great horn was shattered. Who do we say is the great horn? Babylon, the first king, right? And in its place came up 4 notable ones toward the 4 winds of the heavens. So instead of having one world power, they're going to say this didn't work when America was leading the world. It was horrible for everybody. They'll make 4 world powers. They'll power share it. And out of one of them came a little horn. So the anti-Messiah, who will be in a human body, he'll come out of one of those four leaders, which became very great toward the south and toward the east and toward the bountiful land, toward Israel. And it became great even to the host of heaven. And it caused some of the host and of the stars to fall to the ground. He trampled them. Coming directly from Revelation 12. Where there's war in heaven, and Michael is fighting against Satan and his demons, and they're cast out of heaven. And this is what it's talking about. Him coming down. Yea, he magnified himself even to the leader of the host. Talking about Yeshua. And the continual sacrifice was taken away by him. And the place of his sanctuary was cast down. Now, this is a scary part. Because what is the continual sacrifice? Like we said, the daily sacrifice never ended. The daily sacrifice continues. Revelation 12 says we're living sacrifices every day. Hebrews 10:14 says Yeshua's sacrifice is in perpetuity. It's in perpetuity. So even though, as Yahweh's children, we have greater grace, we have the blessing that we can get on our hands and knees, we get to go right to his throne, we have privileges that other people don't have. But at the same rate, what does the Bible say? The sun shines on the wicked as well as the righteous. That Yahweh's grace is on this earth, even on the evil people. You know, that's why Habakkuk says, why? Yahweh, why do the evil prosper? And he says, don't worry, we'll take care of them when the time is right. But here, the scary part about this is, when Satan is cast out of heaven, and he's given authority for 42 months, Yahweh's grace is taken away from the earth. And you think it's dark now, you haven't seen nothing yet. It is going to be the darkest you can ever imagine. It is going to be the most wicked, evil time. And all of these people that are left will be worshiping Satan. And it's going to be, I don't even want to talk about it, but a horrible time for believers. And a massive army was given him against the continual sacrifice because of sin. So the same way of sin in Israel, remember when sin got to its full, whether you were a Canaanite or you were a Hivite or you were an Israelite. When sin got to its full, what did Yahweh do? He cast them out of the land. He said, enough of it. You can't stay in this land and sin any way you want and think you're going to get away with it. Because over here in Israel, Yahweh has a limit to everything. He has a limit to everything. And when the sin is to its full, then like he says in Leviticus, the land will vomit the people out. So this is exactly why it brought, and it threw the truth down to the ground, and it worked and pushed forward. Then I heard a certain holy one speaking to another holy one, to the one who spoke. Until when is the vision? The continual sacrifice and the devastating rebellion revolt, to give both the sanctuary and the massive crowd to be trampled? He said to me, for 2,300 evenings and mornings, then the sanctuary will be made righteous. How much is 2,000 evenings and mornings? It's 1,150 days. Which is exactly 3 years and a few months. Like we said, the time between these two things. Between 3 and 3.5 years. Exactly. So we see it not just from Revelation, but also being supported in the book of Daniel also, the time frame of it. Like we said, at this time the world is going to think the kingdom of Yahweh has come to the earth. We know that the Muslims believe that when the Mahdi returns, also Jesus the prophet will return, killing all Jews and killing all Christians who don't convert at that time. But this 42-month period to the world, they're going to love it, they're going to willingly take the mark, but it'll be the time of Jacob's trouble. To the nation of Israel that is fleeing, and to the believers also, it's going to be a horrible time. Revelation 13, I'll just go over that quickly. Revelation 13. Verse 7. And it was given to him to make war with the saints and overcome them, and authority was given to it over every tribe and kindred and tongue and nation, world government, and all those dwelling on the earth will worship him. Those of whom the names had not been written in the book of life of the Lamb, having been slain from the foundation of the world. So it's only great tribulation to us. The world is worshiping this beast. They're accepting him. Verse 13, and he performed great signs, even as so to make fire come down out of heaven upon the earth before men. And he deceives those dwelling on the earth because of the signs which were given to do before the beast, saying to those dwelling on the earth to make an image to the beast, who has the wound of the sword and lived. And it was given to it to put life into the image of the beast, so that the image of the beast might even speak, and might cause as many as would not worship the image of the beast to be killed. And then he talks about taking the mark of the beast. And we don't have to put much imagination in with the technology they have today, holograms or who knows what, but certainly we see how this could happen. Now, I want to just stop here a minute, because I think that everything I went over here to this point, it's biblical, it's true, the time frame is there, it's set. But I want to go over two prophecies that validate this. Now again, they're speculative. I don't know if they're true or not. I didn't know Judah ben Samuel. He lived in the 1200s, and I certainly didn't know Rabbi Kadori, that also died recently. But both of these men, at least from what we read about them, seem to have been righteous men, and they do claim they got prophecies. Kadori, in his case, claiming that Yeshua personally appeared to him. And I can say firsthand, I know from other cases that this definitely has happened. There's definitely Jewish rabbis in the times we're living in that Yeshua has appeared to. So this is not something that, oh, this guy can't be true. But this is the interesting part about the prophecy, the Kadiri prophecy. Now, Kadiri was a rabbi. He died in 2006. He was somewhere between 108 and 118 years old. Long time to live. They didn't have his birth certificate. They weren't exactly sure, but he was at least 108, maybe up to 118 years. He stated that the Messiah appeared to him and spoke to him and told him certain things. And at this time, when this was happening, toward the end of his life, he almost only talked about the Messiah. He talked about the Messianic age, about the Messiah, the things that the Messiah was going to do, and the fact that the Messiah is appearing to him personally and speaking to him. Well, as we know, in August of 2005, the disengagement happened in Israel. It was a horrible time. Ariel Sharon, who was the father of the settler movement, changed his position and decided they were going to evacuate 8,000 Jews out of Gaza Strip. It's a terrible time. Soldiers going in, tearing people away. As a matter of fact, my friend Sagiv, that some of you know, he was the last person in the synagogue down there. The last one to get torn out and carried out of there. And it was right after that I actually got to meet him and build a friendship. But anyway, this was just days before the Jewish Rosh Hashanah, or Yom Teruah. I think it was a week or a week and a half before that. Well, on Yom Kippur that year, 2005, that's when Kadori came out, gave a message on Yom Kippur, and for the first time openly said, "The Messiah has appeared to me. I know who the Messiah is." And now again, he's an old person. I don't know how sick he was at that time, but he had a note then that he had written, and he said, "Upon my death, I want you to wait 1 year, and then I want you to open this note. And the note is going to reveal who the Messiah is, and it's going to reveal about his coming." Well, Kadori died that January, and also that January, same month, Ariel Sharon goes into a coma. Now, Ariel Sharon was at the top of his game. He had broken off from Likud. He started a new party. He was going to get an overwhelming victory in the Knesset, and he had a brain hemorrhage, went into a coma, and of course, as we know now, he never came out of it. But anyway, they waited the year, and in the next year, when they opened up the note, he put in an acronym who the Messiah is. And in that acronym, it said the Messiah is Yeshua. And the acronym also said, he will lift the people, Isaiah 11, remember we talked about that, and prove that his word and his law are valid. That's why Genesis 22, where it says that Abraham will be tested, and that word is to lift up. Same word that he uses here. He will lift the people, and he will prove that his word, Yahweh's word, and his law are valid. And if you take the first letters of all those words in the Hebrew, it spells the name of Yeshua. In the same prophecy that he told now, remember, he wrote this at Yom Kippur in 2005. It says the Messiah told him that all these things will happen, and he'll be appearing shortly after Ariel Sharon dies. Now, the odd part of it is, that Sharon goes into a coma the same month, and now he's an old man. He's not very healthy. He's very overweight. And at the time, if you remember, they said he would have died within days. When he went into the coma, they gave him no chance of survival at first. And all of a sudden, you never heard about it. And then day went into month went into year, and year went on. And he stayed 8 years in that coma. And all of a sudden now, in January, exactly 8 years later, he dies. So, what does the prophecy mean? I don't know, but it's something I'll watch. It's certainly something that I'll watch and look at. Because to this point, there's too many coincidences that have happened already to show me maybe there is something here. Maybe Yahweh was speaking through this man. The second one I want to talk about is Judah ben Samuel. Now this man was a legendary and prolific German rabbi of the 12th century who made some astonishing and specific predictions about the future of Jerusalem and Israel that came true. So he's living now in AD 1217, a year that he thought was a Jubilee year. He said that. And he's writing in this year. And he's saying that the Ottoman Turks, who weren't even around for 300 years later, remember the Ottoman Empire starts in 1517 until 1917, 400 years. But he says in 300 years from now, the Ottoman Turks are going to take over Israel and Jerusalem, and that they're going to rule for exactly 8 Jubilees. Jubilee is 50 years, that's 400 years. Amazingly enough, in 1517, exactly, now he's saying this in 1217, exactly 300 years later, like he said, they take over. And they take over for exactly 8 Jubilees, 400 years. Then he said in 1917, he said Jerusalem for 1 Jubilee would be no man's land. And what is he talking about, no man's land? Well, in 1917, at the end of World War I, the British overtake Jerusalem, and it doesn't belong to anybody. They're carrying as a caretaker. Like I said, there's actually a strip of land. One side is Palestinian side, one side is Jewish side, and that strip is called no man's land. Exactly what he wrote in the prophecy. Then he said, the 10th Jubilee, that would start in 1967, would be the beginning of the end times, of the Messianic age, and he said that Israel would get back Jerusalem. Exactly in 1967. Now he's writing this in 1217 and given dates. In 1967 is the 6-day war, and Israel takes back Jerusalem. Exactly like he said. So you can do your math, because he said then that would be the setting up, that 10th Jubilee, and then the next one the Messiah would be here. Well, if he's correct, from 1967, 50 years brings you again, 2017. 2017. There's one other thing that's really interesting. First I want to mention also that when you're looking at Yeshua talking about this generation will not pass, that when you look from the very first official declaration of declaring a Palestinian state came from the Balfour Declaration that was done in the year 1917 at the end of World War I. So he talks about wars and rumors of wars, and here it is. From 1917 to 2017, according to Judah ben Samuel's prophecy, would be exactly 100 years. As we know, as a generation in the time of Moses. Then, from the voting of Israel becoming a nation, November 29th, 1947, until 1917, is exactly 70 years, which we know is also a generation. And then from 1967, the time they actually took Jerusalem, to 1917 is exactly 1 Jubilee, 50 years. So, again, coincidence? Maybe. But that those 3 years and the 3 most important things to happen to the nation that Yahweh and Yeshua said to watch for, the making of the fig tree, could it really be a coincidence that they all come together at the same time? I don't know. But that's why I'm saying watch. To watch for that. Now the last thing that I want to mention on this is a video that we saw a few weeks ago called The Harbinger by Jonathan Kahn. And it's a very interesting video because he shows that 911 that happened to America, there were 9 harbingers that fulfill the Isaiah 9:10 prophecy, of bricks have fallen, but we will rebuild. You know, the cedar tree, not the cedar tree, the oak tree. The oak tree is fallen, but we will rebuild with cedars. And he goes in pretty sycamore, the sycamore tree, and we will rebuild with cedars. And I think he goes through pretty conclusively good evidence showing these 9 harbingers. You know, it's an interesting video to watch and to look at. And the judgment that he's claiming is coming on America by these 9 harbingers. Now the interesting thing is this, though, when you look at it, is that 2001 was also a sabbatical year. And in the sabbatical year, we know the sabbatical year is the year of releasing debt, right? And what is Babylon all about? Babylon is all about money. Babylon is about controlling the people. It's about controlling the people, Revelation 18, making slaves of the souls of men through debt and money. So here it is, in the very year that's a sabbatical year, in 2001, Babylon is judged. You know, that's when 911 happens. But what's interesting, according to Scripture, on the 29th of Elul, that's the last day before the 1st of Tishri, that's the day you're supposed to release the debts to the people. You know? So here 911 happens in 2001, and on September 17th, that was, according to the Jewish calendar, or the biblical calendar, that was the 29th of Elul. The 29th of Elul happened on that date, September 17th. What was important about September 17th that year? The stock market fell almost 700 points. It was the 3rd largest fall ever. Now, the next one comes, 2008, right? That's the next sabbatical year. You go to the 29th of Elul, it was September 29th. That year, the stock market fell 777.7 points. The biggest fall ever. There's never a history in the market where it ever fell more points than that in one single day. And it happened on the day they're supposed to be releasing the debts. So you see, each time it's getting worse. In 1994, it also happened. Not as bad, but there was also a big crash. 2001 was 911, worse. 2008 was the worst ever. Interesting enough, I looked it up. The next sabbatical year, 2015, right? We're saying 2014 to 2018 is big. 2015, maybe the fall of Babylon. Elul 29th of 2015, guess what date it falls on? September 11th. So, who knows? Of course, the days go sunset to sunset, so September 11th to September 12th. But will that be the final judgment on Babylon? I don't know. But I say, when I see these things, I watch. I'm not predicting. I'm not telling you this will happen. What I'm saying is to watch. To watch. But one thing is certain. One thing is certain. When you look in the Scripture, there's no doubt America's Babylon. There's no doubt that Yahweh says He'll judge the nation. There's no doubt He's telling us ahead of time, because He says 7 times to His people, get out of there. I'm going to destroy it. There won't be one person left. And another thing that's certain is every year we go by, we see it's getting worse. There's no doubt about it, that it's getting worse. I want to, before I end here, and I'm running out of time quickly, but I got to go over this. I want to go over why I believe, though, this judgment, not only on America, but on Israel, is going to start now. Because it's something that is extremely important that happened this fall, just in the last 2 months. Ezekiel 33, I'm not going to read it for time reasons. You could read it yourself. But it talks about the watchman. That if the watchman sees the destruction coming and he doesn't warn the people, then the blood will be on his head. But if he warns the people and they don't repent, then the blood will be on their own head. And I do believe I'm a watchman for Israel. I believe it's one of the reasons why Yahweh put me here. And I do have to bring up something that is a heinous situation that has happened in this land over the last month or so. Maybe even a little bit longer. Leviticus 20, in verse 1. And Yahweh spoke to Moses, saying, and you shall say to the sons of Israel, if any man of the sons of Israel and the aliens who are living in Israel, sorry to have to use that word alien, who gives of his seed to Moloch, shall certainly be put to death. The people of the land shall stone him with stones, and I will set my face against that man, and shall cut him off from the midst of his people, for he has given of his seed to Moloch, so as to defile my sanctuary and to pollute my holy name. And if the people of the land truly hide their eyes from that man, as he gives a seat to Moloch, so as not to put him to death, then I shall set my face against that man and against his family, and shall cut him off, and all who go a-whoring after him, even go a-whoring after Moloch from the midst of his people. And what is he talking about here? He's talking about, only life comes from Yahweh. We know that when a sperm fertilizes an egg, there's life at conception. 9 months later, a baby is born. And only Yahweh gives that life, and only Yahweh takes that life away. But these people were giving their seed to Moloch. They were sacrificing their children. And in the world today, 40 to 50 million abortions every year worldwide. This is heinous. I mean, this is pathetic. It's sick that worldwide people would be killing, not a couple, not a few thousand, 40 to 50 million babies. Well, about 6 weeks ago or so, maybe 4 weeks ago, in Israel, unfortunately they passed a law here making some of the most liberal abortion laws in the world now here in Israel. And I'll tell it from the top down, I'm not afraid to say it, that unless they do something quickly and change this, I believe this is what's going to start this judgment. Because Yahweh is very clear on something, and I'll prove it to you. If you go to Leviticus 18, in verse 21. Leviticus 18 and verse 21, back a few pages. He says, "You shall not give your seed to pass them through to Moloch, nor shall you pollute the name of your Elohim." Same thing that we just read, right? But here it gets a little more defined. Look at verse 1. "And Yahweh spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the sons of Israel and say to them, I am Yahweh your Elohim. You shall not do according to the doings of the land of Egypt in which you lived, and you shall not do according to the land of Canaan to which I am bringing you. You shall not walk in their statutes. You shall do my judgments, and you shall keep my statutes to walk in them. I am Yahweh your Elohim." If you drop down to verse 24. "Do not defile yourself with all these, for all these the nations have been defiled, which I am casting out before you. And the land is defiled, and I will visit its iniquity on it. And the land is vomiting out those living in it. And you shall keep my statutes and my judgments, and not do any of these disgusting acts, neither the native nor the alien who is staying in your midst. For the men of the land who are before you have done all these disgusting acts, and the land is defiled. Do not do these, lest the land vomit you out for defiling it, as it vomited out the nation that was before you. For anyone who does any of these disgusting things, even the persons who are doing them, shall be cut off from the midst of their people. And you shall keep my charge, so not to do any of the disgusting customs before they're committed before you. And you shall not defile yourself with them. I am Yahweh your Elohim." So like I said, it's a whole different accountability. Much is given, much is expected. The more is given, the more required. And I can tell you firsthand, you come to Israel, you better have your head on straight. Because when we see here, Yahweh says there's a reason why he cast out these people. And also homosexuality is in the same chapter. And that's something that we know about in America, how liberal they've gotten with it, making even all the laws for it, but over here it's becoming the same thing. And Yahweh will not allow it. Yahweh will not allow it. There's a point where he says, enough. And we see it right here, whether it was the people that were here before Israel, or Israel themselves. When they hit that point, when like he says, the cup was full, Babylon's cup was full, that's the end of it. And I believe that what they've done here with passing this new abortion law, unless they change it, and I don't see it happening, will be a major, major thing to their downfall coming in these days, in these years ahead. So, like I said, the prophecies I went over today are sure. They're written in Scripture. The only thing in doubt is the timing of them. We're seeing situations that are pointing to these years, but we don't know for sure. And that's why Yahweh tells us to watch. But a few things are certain. There is 70 years given to Jerusalem of trial before Yahweh releases them. And there are 70 years given to Babylon to rule the nations before Yahweh destroys them. That's set. The problem is, when do you start? That can be debatable or discussed, but clearly there's 70 years given for each. Also, the 3.5-year difference between the setting up of the New World Order in 1945 and the setting up of the Kingdom of Israel in 1948, I think is very telling when you look at some of the other prophecies we went over today. The Kedori prophecy is interesting, as well as Judah ben Samuel, pointing to the Jubilee of 2017, 2018. Before the destruction of the temple in 70 AD, there was a man called Josiah ben Ananias. And Yahweh had this man start a 7-year prophecy about the destruction of the temple 7 years before it happened. Almost every day he'd go out and say, this place is going to be destroyed. There were voices heard in the temple saying, we've left this place. People saw chariots of fire, Josephus talks about this, in the air. All of these odd things that happened before the destruction of the temple as signs, physical signs, for Yahweh to show them what was coming. It even states that a sheep gave birth to a calf. You know, why it says that, I don't know, but just odd things, just things that this isn't normal. There's something happening. The same would, I believe, the weather. There's no way on earth you could look at all those weather things happening, and without a doubt, in the last couple of years, it's intensified without seeing how close we're getting. Again, 5 blood moons. The first one starting Sukkot 2013. Now we have the blood moon of coming in Pesach 214, Sukkot 214, Pesach 215, Sukkot 215, and the day of the vernal equinox 2015, the first day of the biblical year, is a complete solar eclipse. So 2014 may be tremendous years to watch, to see prophecy fulfilled before our eyes, and like Yeshua said, when you see these things happening, look up. Your salvation is near. Yahweh bless.